the moment you realized something was being taken from you. Not all at once. Slowly, one thing disappeared, then another, then another. People you thought were permanent, plans you trusted, strength you relied on, confidence you built your name on. And the worst part, God didn't stop it. He watched it happen. You thought the wilderness was about survival. It's not. It's about removal, because God will never use a man who is still carrying what weakens him. Every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. John 15:2. Notice that. God doesn't strip dead men. He strips fruitful ones. The wilderness doesn't start by attacking your strength. It attacks your supports, the things you leaned on instead of leaning on God. People who spoke comfort but killed discipline. Habits that made life easier but made your spirit lazy. Identity built on applause instead of obedience. So God removes them quietly, ruthlessly, without asking permission. Brother, this is where most men get angry with God. They say, "Why would you take this from me?" But Scripture already answered that. He humbled thee. Deuteronomy 8:3. God humbles before he elevates, not to shame you, to empty you, because a man full of himself has no room for God. The wilderness strips your pride first, not the loud pride, the silent kind, the pride that says, "I can handle this. I don't need help. I've been through worse. I know what I'm doing." God lets life dismantle that lie. Then he strips your identity. You stop being the strong one, the reliable one, the admired one, the leader everyone depends on. Suddenly, you're just you. And that terrifies men, because now there's no title to hide behind. This is why the wilderness feels unfair. You didn't sin to get here. You didn't fail. You didn't betray God. You were chosen, and chosen men are dangerous when they are unstripped. So God does it himself. Even Jesus was stripped before use. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness. Matthew 4:1. No crowd, no miracles, no reputation, just hunger, silence, obedience. If the Son of God was stripped first, why would you expect exemption? Brother, this is where God checks something critical. What do you do when he removes what you love? Do you obey, or do you complain? Do you stay, or do you retreat? Do you trust, or do you accuse? The wilderness doesn't argue with you. It waits, and the waiting exposes everything. Be still, and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Stillness isn't peace. Stillness is submission without answers. God strips distractions, so discipline can grow. He strips noise, so discernment sharpens. He strips comfort, so obedience becomes muscle, not emotion. And yes, it hurts. That pain is intentional, because Scripture is clear. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now have I kept thy word. Psalm 119:67. Affliction corrected what comfort could not. The wilderness didn't ruin you, it aligned you. Most men never make it past this stage. They keep trying to replace what God removed. New people, new habits, new escapes. But God keeps stripping until you finally understand. Nothing survives the wilderness except obedience. Brother, this is the stage where men are separated. Some will harden, some will complain, some will quit. Others will bow their head, clench their jaw, and stay. Those men change. Because when God finishes stripping you, there's nothing left to break, nothing left to steal, nothing left to manipulate. who stands on truth, discipline, and obedience. And that man, God can finally use. After God strips what you lean on, He comes for something deeper, who you thought you were. This is the part that hurts the most, because losing things is painful, but losing identity, that shakes a man to his bones. You wake up one day, and you don't recognize yourself anymore. You don't feel strong. You don't feel confident. You don't feel respected. The title you carried doesn't fit. The role you played feels empty. The version of you people admired is fading, and God lets it happen because a man cannot be used by God while still living off an old version of himself. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself. Matthew 16:24. Denying yourself isn't poetic. It means letting parts of you die. The wilderness kills the identity that was built on approval, performance, validation, strength you didn't earn. So God removes the audience. Friends stop calling. Support fades. People disappear without explanation. And you're left asking, why am I alone? Brother, you're alone because God is separating you. I will separate you. Jeremiah 15:19. Not everyone is allowed to walk with you into the next phase. Some people were for comfort, some were for survival, few are for purpose. The wilderness exposes the difference. This is why relationships collapse here, not because you became toxic, but because you stopped being convenient. You stopped entertaining weakness. You stopped chasing approval. You stopped lowering standards, and people felt it. God removes people who would keep you soft. He removes voices that confuse obedience. He removes attachments that delay your growth. A man's foes shall be they of his own household. Matthew 10:36. That verse isn't symbolic, it's real. Brother, this is where loneliness sets in. Real loneliness. Not the kind you post about, the kind you sit with at night. No messages, no distractions, no emotional crutches. Just you and the weight of becoming. This loneliness isn't to break you, it's to retrain you, to teach you how to stand without praise, walk without witnesses, obey without encouragement. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Lamentations 3:27. The yoke is discipline, and discipline is forged in isolation. The wilderness teaches you something brutal. Most people were never meant to walk the full distance with you. They were chapters, not the whole book. And once you accept that, something inside you hardens. In a good way. You stop explaining yourself. You stop proving your pain. You stop begging people to stay. You let them go. Quietly. Because God is teaching you how to carry responsibility without company. This is where strength feels gone, not because you're weaker, but because God removed fake strength. Strength built on adrenaline, emotion, ego. Now He's building real strength, the kind that doesn't shake. My strength is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. Weakness is where God installs endurance. Brother, this phase feels like death, because it is. Not physical death, identity death. The old you cannot survive, where God is taking you, and God will not drag him forward. He lets him die. But hear this clearly. What dies in the wilderness does not die in vain. It makes room. Room for discipline, room for clarity, room for authority, room for obedience that doesn't flinch. When God finishes this stage, you won't feel loud. You'll feel solid, calm, heavy, unmovable. And that's when God knows you're ready for the next phase. After the stripping, after the loneliness, after the identity dies, God watches one thing, not your pain, not your tears, not your prayers, your obedience. The wilderness does not ask if you understand. It asks if you will move anyway. This is where men fail, because obedience without clarity feels like madness. You're walking with no map, no promise, no confirmation, just the next step, and God stays quiet. Because silence is the test. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Proverbs 3:5. Understanding comes after obedience, not before. Brother, this is where excuses die. You can't say, I'm waiting for a sign. I'll move when it makes sense. I'll obey when it feels right. The wilderness doesn't care how you feel. It cares how you move. Many men stay stuck here because they want certainty before commitment. But God doesn't build leaders that way. He builds leaders who move while everything is uncertain. The just shall live by faith. Habakkuk 2:4. This is why some men never leave the wilderness. They keep negotiating. They obey halfway. They delay fully. They compromise quietly. And God waits, because partial obedience is still disobedience. To obey is better than sacrifice. 1 Samuel 15:22. God doesn't want your emotion. He wants your alignment. Faith is action under pressure. Brother, obedience in the wilderness feels unrewarded. No applause, no immediate results, no recognition, just discipline, routine, consistency, and silence. But Scripture already told you this. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life. James 1:12. Endurance comes before the crown, always. This is where God separates men permanently. Some will quit quietly. Some will return to comfort. Some will blame God. Some will blame people. Others will keep walking, not fast, not loud, steady. Those men scare the enemy, because a man who learned obedience in silence cannot be manipulated by noise. A man who learned discipline in isolation cannot be shaken by pressure. A man who survived stripping cannot be threatened with loss. There's nothing left to take. Brother, this is the moment God sees readiness. Not when you speak well, not when you feel strong, not when you look confident, but when you obey, even when everything inside you is tired. He that endureth to the end shall be saved. Matthew 24:13. Endurance is proof. And then, quietly, God moves you. No announcement, no warning, no celebration. One day the wilderness loosens its grip. Doors open without force. Paths appear without explanation. You don't rush. You walk, because you're not the same man anymore. The man who leaves the wilderness doesn't brag about survival. He carries authority that only pressure can produce. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't chase validation. He moves with calm certainty, because he knows if God stripped him, God will position him. This is why God stripped you, not to break you, but to make sure when he uses you, nothing in you breaks.